My mother always treated affection like currency, but I never expected her to calculate my worth out loud. On my 33rd birthday, Nadine raised her glass and announced, I wasn't a miracle, just a smart investment for tax benefits. The room went dead silent. She laughed, calling it a funny family story. But as I watched her cold, smiling eyes, I realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't joking, and the life I thought I knew was nothing but a ledger entry. I had spent my entire life curating a version of myself that was easy to digest. I was the good daughter. I was the grateful child. I was the one who never asked for too much, never took up too much space, and always said thank you. It was a habit drilled into me before I could even tie my own shoes. A survival mechanism developed in the shadow of a mother who treated affection like a limited-time offer that could be rescinded at the slightest provocation. For my 33rd birthday, I decided to stage a reset. I convinced myself that if the setting was perfect enough, the script of our relationship might finally change. I chose the Avery, a restored farmhouse restaurant on the edge of Briar Glen that smelled of rosemary and wood smoke. It was intimate but elegant, the kind of place where voices naturally lowered to a respectful murmur and the lighting forgave tired eyes. I arrived 20 minutes early to check the table settings. I wanted everything to be impeccable. My fiancé, Grant, sat at the head of the table, checking his watch. He looked handsome in his navy blazer, though his expression held that familiar, tight-lipped patience he always adopted when my mother was involved. You need to relax, Eleanor, Grant said, reaching out to smooth a wrinkle in the tablecloth I'd been picking at. It is just dinner. She will behave. It is your birthday. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that 33 years was enough time to outgrow the tension that hummed between Nadine and me like a high-voltage wire. I had invited only my closest circle. There was Marisol Vance, my best friend since the 4th grade, who knew where all the bodies were buried, and her husband, David. There was Grant, and there was Nadine. My mother arrived 25 minutes late. The restaurant was understated, filled with earth tones and matte finishes. Nadine swept in like a peacock crashing a funeral. She was wearing a floor-length silver gown covered in sequins that caught every flicker of candlelight, paired with a white faux fur stole that looked aggressive in the mid-September warmth. She did not look like a mother coming to celebrate her daughter. She looked like a starlet arriving at a premiere she intended to hijack. Everyone turned. It was impossible not to. She possessed a gravitational pull that sucked the air out of the room, demanding that you either orbit her or suffocate. There is my birthday girl, Nadine announced, her voice pitching perfectly to carry across the dining room. She swooped down on me, enveloping me in a cloud of heavy gardenia perfume. Her cheek brushed mine, cold, dry, and brief. It was the air kiss of a socialite, not the embrace of a parent. I am so sorry I'm late. Darling, she said, pulling back to inspect me. She held me at arm's length, her eyes scanning my simple silk dress with a critical precision I felt in my marrow. Traffic coming out of the city was absolute murder, but look at you. Simple. Very simple. Thank you for coming. Mom, I said, ignoring the barb. Please, sit down. The waiter was just about to take drink orders. Nadine settled into the chair next to Grant, effectively taking the head of the table opposite him and relegating me to the side. She smiled at everyone, a bright, beaming expression that did not involve her eyes. Her eyes were hard, calculating little flints of blue. She ordered the most expensive bottle of Cabernet on the list without asking anyone else, then turned her attention to me. I was just telling my yoga instructor this morning how lucky you are. Eleanor, she said, leaning forward, most people your age are still struggling to find their footing, but you? You have always had such a safety net. I took a sip of water, trying to keep my hands steady. I have worked hard. Mom, I just got that promotion to senior analyst. Nadine waved a hand, dismissing my career with a flick of her wrist. Hard work is lovely, dear, but let us be honest, you have had doors opened for you. You have always had the wind at your back because I made sure of it. Grant cleared his throat. Eleanor is very talented. Nadine, she earned that spot. Nadine patted Grant's hand, her nails clicking against his watch. Of course she is talented, but talent needs opportunity. Grant, and opportunity costs money. I have always been happy to pay the price for Eleanor's stability. It is what a mother does, even when it requires significant sacrifice. Marisol kicked me gently under the table. I looked at her and saw the warning in her eyes. Do not engage. Let it slide. The dinner proceeded in a series of jagged peaks and valleys. Nadine would tell a charming anecdote about her garden, lulling the table into a sense of safety. And then she would pivot. She made a comment about how Marisol had gained weight but carried it bravely. She asked Grant if his family was planning to contribute to the wedding or if she needed to rescue us again. Every time the conversation settled, she threw a stone into the water to watch the ripples. I ate my scallops without tasting them. I was performing the role of the happy daughter, nodding at the right times, laughing when she expected laughter. I was 33 years old, successful, engaged, and independent. Yet in her presence, I was 6 years old again, desperate to keep her mood stable so the ground wouldn't fall out from under me. Then came the toast. We had just finished the main courses. The waiter was clearing the plates. Nadine stood up, tapping her fork against her wine glass. The sharp ding, ding, ding cut through the low murmur of the restaurant. I would like to say a few words, she said. My stomach dropped. Grant reached under the table and squeezed my knee. Nadine held her glass aloft, the red wine swirling like blood in the candlelight. She looked down at me with a smile that terrified me. It was too wide, too sharp. To Eleanor, she began, my beautiful project. A few guests at nearby tables glanced over. Nadine basked in the attention. You know, people always told me I was a saint for taking you on, she said, chuckling softly. And looking at you now, I have to say, my instincts were right. We have had our struggles, haven't we? You were such a difficult, needy child, so demanding of resources. She paused for effect. The table was silent. Marisol was staring at her plate. But I always knew you would pay off in the end, Nadine continued, her voice taking on a strangely pragmatic tone. When I brought you home, I remember looking at the paperwork and thinking, well, at least the write-off will be substantial. She laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. Everyone acts like adoption is this great emotional journey, she said, looking around the table as if inviting us in on a joke. But let us be real. It is a transaction. And you, Eleanor, you were adopted for tax benefits. The air left the room. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I waited for the punchline. I waited for her to say, just kidding, or to pivot into a metaphor about how I was a gift. She did not pivot. You were a smart investment, not a miracle, Nadine said, raising her glass higher. And look at the return on investment. Happy birthday. Darling. She drank. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The silence was heavy, thick, and suffocating. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of witnessing a car crash. Then Grant laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. Okay, Nadine, he said, his voice too loud. That is quite a sense of humor you have. Nadine sat down, looking pleased with herself. She picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth. I am just being honest. Grant, we are all adults here. No need for fairy tales. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The chair scraped loudly against the floorboards. A harsh shriek that made Nadine flinch. Excuse me, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a tin can. I need to use the restroom. Eleanor, Nadine started, her tone dismissive. Don't be dramatic. I walked away. I did not run. Though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to sprint, I walked past the open kitchen, past the host stand, and into the ladies' room. I locked the door behind me and collapsed against the sink. My reflection in the mirror was pale, my eyes wide and dark. Adopted for tax benefits. It was insane. It was cruel. It was exactly the kind of thing a narcissist would say to wound a daughter who was getting too much attention on her birthday. But as I gripped the cold porcelain of the sink, trying to breathe, a strange clarity snapped into place. Nadine did not do impulsive. Nadine did not do accidental slips of the tongue. Every cruel thing she had ever said to me had been calibrated for maximum damage, but this felt different. It felt rehearsed. "You were a smart investment." The specific phrasing rattled around in my skull. It didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like financial jargon. I splashed cold water on my face. I dried my skin with a paper towel, watching the damp spots turn gray. I could not stay in here. If I stayed in here, she won. If I cried, she won. I applied a fresh layer of lipstick. I straightened my spine. I was Eleanor Coleman. I was 33. I was not a victim. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere was funereal. Marisol looked ready to lunge across the table and strangle my mother. Grant was aggressively discussing the weather with David. Nadine was eating a piece of bread, unbothered. I sat down. "Did you fix your face?" Nadine asked, not looking up. "You looked a little peaked." "I am fine." "Mom," I said. We finished the cake. We paid the bill. I walked my mother to her car, a sleek black sedan that cost more than my first 2 years of college tuition. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," she said, leaning in to kiss the air near my ear again. "You really should lighten up. It was a joke." "God, you are so sensitive." "Drive safe," I said. I watched her taillights fade into the dark of Briar Glen. Grant put his arm around me. "She is crazy," he said. "You know that, right? She is just dramatic and mean, and she wanted to ruin your night. Do not listen to her." I nodded, leaning into him. "You are right." But as we drove home, watching the familiar suburban streets roll by, I couldn't shake it. A smart investment. It was too precise. It was too specific to be a random insult. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Grant's steady breathing beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nadine's smile. The next morning, as soon as Grant left for work, I went into the home office. We kept our files in a gray metal cabinet in the closet. I had always been organized, another trait developed to counter Nadine's chaos. I pulled out the folder labeled Personal Docs. Eleanor. I spread the papers out on the desk. There was my social security card, my passport, a copy of my birth certificate. I picked up the birth certificate. It was a photocopy. The paper slightly yellowed. I had used it for school enrollments, for jobs, for my marriage license application. I had never really looked at it. I looked at it now. It was a certificate of live birth, issued by the state. It listed Nadine Coleman as the mother and Martin Coleman as the father. Date of birth, September 12, 1992. But something was wrong. I held it up to the light. It was a copy of a copy. The edges were slightly blurred, and down at the bottom, where the file number should be, the ink was smudged, almost illegible. I dug deeper into the folder. Where was the adoption decree? Nadine had always been open about the fact that I was adopted, or at least, she had been open about the fact that she chose me. But I realized, with a sudden jolt of cold fear, that I had never seen the actual legal decree. I searched the entire cabinet. I found tax returns from 5 years ago. I found the warranty for our refrigerator. I found a veterinary record for a cat I had 10 years ago. I did not find an adoption decree. I did not find an original birth certificate with a raised seal. I found a folder that felt oddly light, incomplete. I sat back in the chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. The original packet. I remembered asking Nadine for it when I was 18 and applying for college aid. She had waved me off. "I will handle it. Eleanor, you will just lose it. You do not need to worry about adult things." I picked up my phone. My hands were trembling. I scrolled to Dad in my contacts. Martin Coleman. He and Nadine had divorced when I was 12. He was a good man, a quiet man, who had been steamrolled by Nadine for a decade before finally escaping to a condo in Florida. He answered on the second ring. "Ellie? Happy belated birthday. Kiddo, did you get the card?" "I got it." Dad, thank you. Something in my voice must have tipped him off. The warmth in his tone evaporated. What is wrong? Is it Nadine? I took a deep breath. She said something at dinner last night. Dad, she said I was adopted for tax benefits. She said I was an investment. The line went silent. I waited. I expected him to laugh. I expected him to say, "Oh, Ellie, you know your mother. She says crazy things when she drinks." He did not laugh. I heard him exhale, a long, shaky sound that traveled 2,000 miles over the cellular network. "Dad?" I said. "Your mom promised she would never say it like that," Martin whispered. The phone felt slippery in my hand. "Say it like what?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "Dad, was I adopted for tax benefits?" "It is complicated." "Ellie," he said. His voice sounded old. "We were in a tight spot. The business was failing. Nadine met some people. She said she found a way to fix things. She brought you home and said we were helping a child and helping ourselves." "Martin, tell me the truth. Did you adopt me?" "We signed papers." "Ellie, of course we did. I raised you. You are my daughter." "But was it legal?" I asked. "I do not know all the details," he said, his voice cracking. "Nadine handled the paperwork. She always handled the paperwork. You know that. She told me not to ask questions if I wanted a stable family. So I didn't. I closed my eyes. I have to go. Dad, Ellie, wait." I hung up. I sat in the silence of my home office, the morning sun streaming across the desk, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It wasn't a joke. I grabbed my keys. The Briar Glen County Records Office was a brick building downtown, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I took a number and waited 40 minutes on a hard plastic bench. When my number was called, I walked up to the glass partition. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with bifocals on a chain. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to request a copy of my long-form birth certificate and my adoption decree." I said, "My name is Eleanor Coleman, date of birth, September 12th, 1992. She typed into her computer. Her face remained blank. She frowned, typed something else, and then stopped. She looked up at me over her glasses. "I cannot give you these records." "Hun, why not?" I asked. "I have my ID. I am the person on the record. They are flagged." She said, "Flagged? What does that mean?" "It means they are sealed under a specific administrative hold. Usually, that happens with closed adoptions from that era. But this code is distinct." She turned the screen slightly away from me. It says, "Pending verification and external guardian protocol." I stared at her. External guardian protocol? What is that? "I have never seen that specific tag before," she admitted. "But it means I cannot print anything, not even the basic abstract. You are going to have to submit a formal request to the state archives in the Capitol." She slid a form across the counter. "Fill this out. Mail it. It takes 6 to 8 weeks. I looked at the form. It felt like a wall. "Is there any other reason a file would be flagged like that?" I asked. The clerk lowered her voice. "Usually, it happens when there is a discrepancy in the original filing, or when the identity is being disputed." "Thank you," I whispered. I walked out of the building into the bright, blinding sunlight. I felt unmoored. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, but I knew it wasn't. I drove home on autopilot. That night, Grant made pasta. He tried to be cheerful. He talked about his day, about the game this weekend. I watched his mouth move, but I couldn't hear him. I was thinking about a memory from when I was 7 years old. I had been playing in the living room. Nadine was at the dining table with a stack of papers and a calculator. She was smiling, a genuine, private smile I rarely saw. "Look at this, Eleanor," she had said, waving a check in the air. "You are earning your keep today." I had asked what she meant. "Adult things," she had said, snapping the check into a leather portfolio. "You do not need to worry about adult things. You just be a good girl, and Mommy will handle the numbers." I sat on the couch, watching Grant eat. He wanted me to let it go. He wanted peace. He wanted the wedding to go smoothly. If I told him what I found, or what I didn't find, He would tell me to stop digging. He would say Martin was confused and the clerk was incompetent. But I knew my mother hadn't just insulted me. She had confessed. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was an asset. And if there were tax benefits, if there were investments, if there were returns, then there was a paper trail. I looked at Grant. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You are quiet." "I am fine." I lied. Just tired. I wasn't going to tell Nadine. I wasn't going to give her the chance to spin the story or hide the evidence. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was the easy, grateful daughter who would swallow any humiliation to keep the peace. She was wrong. I was going to find the ledger. I was going to find the money. And I was going to find out who I really was before she decided to cash me out. This wasn't family gossip anymore. This was a financial crime. And I was the evidence. The office of Dana Rook was located in a converted brownstone on the edge of the legal district, a place that smelled of lemon polish and expensive coffee. I had chosen her because her website emphasized discretion and complex family structures, which felt like a polite way of saying she knew how to handle rich people behaving badly. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too large for me, clutching a folder of printed emails and photocopies. Dana sat opposite me. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, geometric glasses and a stillness that made me feel like I was vibrating in place. "I am not here to sue my mother," I said, realizing how defensive I sounded. "I just want to clarify my legal standing. There seems to be some confusion regarding my adoption paperwork, and I need to know where I stand before I get married." Dana nodded, tapping a gold pen against her notepad. "Identity confirmation," she said. "It is more common than you might think. People lose records, courthouses flood, fires happen. But you said your mother made a specific comment?" "She said I was a smart investment," I said. My voice remained steady, though my stomach gave a familiar lurch. "She said I was adopted for tax benefits." Dana stopped tapping the pen. She looked at me, really looked at me. For a long moment, there is a significant legal distinction between adoption and guardianship. "Eleanor," she said, "adoption is a total legal severance from the biological parents and a total grafting onto the new family. It is permanent. You become, for all intents and purposes, their blood." "And guardianship?" I asked. "Guardianship is custody," Dana explained. "It gives an adult the right to make decisions for a child. Usually because the biological parents are unable to do so, it is often temporary, though it can last until adulthood. And crucially, it often comes with state stipends, foster care payments, or access to specific charitable funds that adoption does not always provide." I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. "So, if I were under a guardianship," I asked, "my mother would have received money?" "It is possible," Dana said, "but if she legally adopted you later, those payments usually stop or change structure. The tax benefits for adoption are a one-time credit. Generally, guardianship payments are monthly. They are maintenance." She wrote something down on her pad. "If she told people she adopted you, but actually kept you under a permanent guardianship arrangement without finalizing the adoption decree. She could have theoretically collected state funds for your care while publicly playing the role of the benevolent mother. It would be distinctively unethical and potentially fraudulent." I stared at the rows of law books behind her head. It was the first time someone had validated the quiet. Sick feeling in my gut. "I need you to find out." I said, "We will start with a record search." Dana said, "But Eleanor, you need to prepare yourself. If the paperwork does not match the story you have been told your entire life, you are going to be opening a door that cannot be easily closed." I left her office with a list of tasks. The first was to run a comprehensive credit report. Not the free summary I usually checked, but a deep dive forensic report that tracked every address and alias associated with my social security number. I did it that evening, sitting at the kitchen island while Grant watched a documentary about World War II in the living room. The blue light of the laptop screen felt like the only illumination in the world. The report generated a PDF that was 40 pages long. I scrolled past my student loans, my car payments, the credit card I shared with Grant. Then I stopped. Under the section labeled Historical Addresses, there was an entry for a post office box in a town called Oakhaven, 3 hours south of Briar Glen. The dates corresponded to when I was 12 years old. I had never lived in Oakhaven. I had never even visited Oakhaven. I scrolled down to closed accounts. There were 2 credit lines opened when I was 16. One was a store card for a home improvement chain. The other was a small personal loan for $5,000, taken out from a payday lender and paid off in full 3 months later. I was 16. I was a sophomore in high school. I was worrying about geometry tests and whether the boy in my history class liked me. I certainly wasn't taking out loans for $5,000. I looked at the cosigner listed on the loan data. It was redacted, but the address matched the Oakhaven post office box. "Grant?" I called out. "Yeah?" he answered. "Distracted. Come look at this." He walked into the kitchen, carrying a bowl of popcorn. He leaned over my shoulder, smelling of butter and salt. "What is it?" "Look at this loan," I said, pointing to the screen. "It was taken out in my name 17 years ago. I didn't open this." Grant squinted. "Probably just a glitch." "Babe, credit bureaus make mistakes all the time. You should see my dad's report. They think he owns a boat in Florida." "It is not a glitch." "Grant, look at the address. Oakhaven. Mom used to go to Oakhaven for her garden club retreats." Grant straightened up, his face tightening. "Eleanor, are you trying to find things now?" "I am not trying to find things," I said, frustration rising in my chest. "I am looking at my own financial history. If my mother used my identity to take out loans when I was a minor, that is fraud." "She paid it off," Grant said, pointing to the status column. "Look, paid in full, no harm, no foul. Why go looking for trouble? She probably just needed liquidity and didn't want to worry your dad." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a good man, pragmatic and calm, but he had a blind spot the size of a continent when it came to maintaining social order. He believed that if a problem wasn't making noise, it wasn't a problem. It matters. "Grant," I said quietly, "it matters that she felt entitled to use my name like a burner credit card. Just don't let it consume you, okay?" he said, kissing the top of my head. "We have the tasting for the wedding cake this weekend. I don't want you showing up looking like a detective in a noir movie." I closed the laptop, but the anger burned hotter. The next day, I went to Martin's house. My father, or the man I had always called my father, lived in a condo complex that catered to retirees who liked golf and silence. He was surprised to see me in the middle of a workday. I needed to find something. I told him, "A box of old school papers. I think I left it in your storage unit when you moved." Martin looked wary, but he gave me the key. The storage unit was a climate-controlled room down the hall. It was stacked with plastic bins labeled in Nadine's handwriting. She had packed him up when he left. Efficient to the bitter end. I dug through 3 boxes before I found what I was looking for. It wasn't school papers. It was a box labeled Martin, Miscellaneous. Inside were old tax returns, warranty pamphlets, and a stack of check stubs. I flipped through them, dust coating my fingers. Most were mundane. But then I found a stubborn piece of paper clipped to a bank statement from 1998. It was a donation receipt, or maybe a reimbursement stub. The ink was faded, but the logo was clear. The Hawthorne Community Foundation. The memo line read, "Youth Placement Fund, E. Coleman. Placement Fund, not adoption support, not child tax credit. Placement." I pocketed the stub and drove straight to the Hawthorne Community Foundation. It was located in the wealthy district of Briar Glen, housed in a historic mansion that had been converted into offices. The lobby was hushed, with plush carpets and oil paintings of stern-looking men in suits. I approached the receptionist. I would like to speak to someone about a past case. I said, "My name is Eleanor Coleman." The receptionist's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She picked up the phone. "One moment. Please." She whispered something I couldn't hear. 2 minutes later, a woman in a gray suit walked out. She introduced herself as Mrs. Gable, the senior administrator. She did not shake my hand. "Miss Coleman," she said, her voice cool and practiced. "How can we help you?" "I found a document linking my name to your youth placement fund from the late 90s. I said, holding up the stub, "I am trying to understand the nature of the arrangement. I was told I was adopted, but I'm finding records that suggest other avenues." Mrs. Gable's expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened. She clasped her hands in front of her. "The Hawthorne Foundation is a private philanthropic organization," she recited. "We do not discuss our donors, our beneficiaries, or past cases with the public. I am not the public," I said, stepping closer. "I am the beneficiary. That is my name on the memo line. We have strict privacy protocols." "Mrs. Gable said, "Records from that era are archived and sealed. If you believe there has been an error, you may submit an inquiry in writing, but I must warn you that our policy is to protect the anonymity of all parties involved in sensitive placements." "Sensitive placements?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "It means, Ms. Coleman, that I cannot help you." She turned to walk away. "Does the name Nadine Coleman mean anything to you?" I asked to her back. Mrs. Gable stopped. She didn't turn around. "Please leave, Miss Coleman," she said, "or I will have to call security." I walked out, my heart pounding. She knew exactly who Nadine was, and she was terrified. I needed a drink. I called Marisol. We met at a wine bar near her apartment. Marisol was already there, nursing a Pinot Grigio. She looked tired. "You look like you have been chasing ghosts," she said as I sat down. "I am," I said. I told her about the credit report, the loan in Oakhaven, and the stone wall at the foundation. Marisol listened, tracing the rim of her glass. When I finished, she didn't look surprised. She looked guilty. "Ellie," she said softly. "What?" "I need to tell you something. I didn't think it mattered at the time. But," she took a deep breath, "about 4 years ago, when you were staying with us after that breakup with Jason, Nadine came over one afternoon when you were at work. She said she wanted to drop off a care package." "Okay," I said slowly. "She asked me if I knew where you kept your important papers," Marisol said. "She told me there was a scholarship opportunity, something for women in business, and she needed to verify your social security number to nominate you. She said it was a surprise, and she didn't want to bother you if you were busy. And I showed her where your file box was," Marisol whispered. "She went through it for maybe 10 minutes. Then she wrote something down and left. I never saw a scholarship. I felt a wave of nausea." Nadine had come into my friend's home, used her charm to bypass my privacy, and harvested my identity for God knows what. She used you. I said, "I am so sorry." "Ellie," she made it sound so motherly, like she was trying to help you get ahead. "That is her gift, isn't it?" I said, bitter laughter bubbling up. "She makes theft look like charity." I left Marisol's with a buzzing in my head that had nothing to do with the wine. I drove to Martin's condo again. It was late, past 8 in the evening. But I didn't care. I let myself in with the key he had given me for emergencies. He was in his recliner, reading a paperback. He looked up, startled. "Ellie, what is it? I need the truth." "Dad," I said, "no more protecting her. No more, it's complicated." I sat on the ottoman in front of him. "I went to the Hawthorne Foundation today. They acted like I was radioactive. I found a loan in my name from when I was 16. Nadine has been using me, Dad, and you let her." Martin closed his book. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He looked incredibly weary. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said. "Tell me," I commanded. "We didn't adopt you as a baby," he said softly. I froze. "What?" "Nadine brought you home when you were 2 years old." Martin said, "I came home from a business trip, and you were there, in the guest room. She had set up a crib. She told me a friend of a friend was in trouble, a legal crisis, and needed someone to watch the little girl for a while." "A while?" I asked. "Weeks turned into months." He said, "You were so sweet. Ellie, you were so scared. I fell in love with you. We both did. Or I thought we did. And then she told me the mother wasn't coming back. She said there were arrangements being made. She told me that if I wanted to keep you, if I wanted to have a stable family, I should never ask about the paperwork. She said she had handled it with her connections. So you never signed adoption papers? I asked, my voice trembling. I signed things, he said, consent forms, guardianship acknowledgments, but never a decree from a judge. I asked her about it once. When you were 5, she told me that legally. We were permanent guardians, and that it was the same thing as adoption, just with better tax incentives. He looked at me, his eyes wet. I was a coward. Ellie, I didn't want to lose you, and I knew if I pushed Nadine, she would blow the whole thing up. She always held the keys. I stood up. I felt sick. I wasn't adopted. I was acquired. I was a long-term guest that she monetized. I left Martin sitting in his chair, staring at the floor. The next morning, I went to the bank, in the credit report, amidst the chaos. I had found a reference to a safe deposit box at a local branch. Opened on my 18th birthday, the co-signer was Nadine. I walked into the bank vault with a teller who verified my ID. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign the access card. Box 402. The teller unlocked it and left me alone in the small, sterile room. I pulled out the long metal box. Inside, there was a single envelope. I opened it. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a single sheet of paper. Notarized and dated 15 years ago, it was a letter addressed to whom it may concern. I, Nadine Coleman, assert custodial responsibility for the minor Eleanor Hart, also known as Coleman. Pursuant to the private agreement with the Hawthorne Community Foundation and the undisclosed biological guardian, this document serves as proof of residence for educational and financial purposes. Eleanor Hart, that was my name, not Coleman, Hart. And there it was. Custodial responsibility, not mother, custodian, like a janitor, like someone managing a building. I took a picture of the letter with my phone. Then I put it back. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed. It was my Aunt Sarah, Nadine's sister, Eleanor. Honey, Sarah said, her voice dripping with concern. Your mother just called me. She sounds worried sick. About what? I asked, walking to my car. She says you have been acting very erratically lately. Emotional outbursts? Paranoia? She asked us to be gentle with you. She thinks the stress of the wedding is triggering some underlying issues. I gripped the phone. She is lying. Aunt Sarah. Oh, honey, don't get defensive. We love you. Just maybe take a break? Nadine only wants what is best for you. I hung up. She was circling the wagons. She knew I was digging, and she was preemptively destroying my credibility. If I came out with the truth now, I would just look like the crazy daughter she had already warned everyone about. I got home and found Grant in the kitchen. He looked annoyed. Your mom called. He said, of course she did. She offered to pay for the honeymoon. Eleanor, a full 2 weeks in Italy. She just wants to make peace. She is buying silence. Grant, I snapped. She is trying to cover her tracks. Grant slammed his hand on the counter. Enough. Eleanor, this is getting ridiculous. You are obsessing over paperwork from 20 years ago. Who cares if it was guardianship or adoption? She raised you. She fed you. She lied to me. I screamed. She used my name to launder money or get tax breaks. I found a letter. Grant, my last name isn't even Coleman. It is Hart. Grant rubbed his face. Okay. So your name is Hart. Does that change who you are? Does that change us? It changes everything, I said, because it means my entire history is a fabrication. Grant sighed. I love you, Eleanor, but I can't do this if you are going to turn our life into a conspiracy theory. You need to drop it. For us. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of conflict. Fear of messiness. He wanted the pretty wedding. He didn't want the messy wife with the fraudster mother. I can't drop it. I said, then you are on your own with this, he said, and walked out of the room. I went to the study. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in a cold, hard place of determination. I logged onto the state judiciary website. I found the form for a petition to unseal adoption and custodial records. I filled it out. I attached the scan of the letter I found in the safety deposit box. I attached the credit report. I hovered over the Submit button. The screen displayed a warning. Submission of this petition will trigger an automated notification to all registered parties associated with the original sealing order. If I clicked this, Nadine would know, and whoever registered parties were would know. I clicked Submit. The confirmation screen appeared. Request received. Case number 88,291. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 10 minutes passed. The house was silent. Grant was in the bedroom with the door closed. My phone rang. It wasn't Nadine. It wasn't Martin. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a local area code. I picked it up. Hello? There was a pause. I could hear breathing on the other end. If you are asking about your file, a woman's voice said, low, smoky, and urgent. You are going to wake up people who don't like being seen. Who is this? I asked. My name is Lydia, she said, and you need to stop filing petitions online. They are watching the digital docket. Meet me tomorrow. The line went dead. The cafe Lydia Sutter had chosen was a place called The Grind, located 3 towns over from Briar Glen. It was the kind of establishment that prided itself on anonymity, filled with students wearing noise-canceling headphones and freelancers staring grimly into laptops. It was neutral ground. I arrived 10 minutes early, but Lydia was already there. She was a small woman, perhaps in her early 60s, wearing a beige raincoat that looked 2 sizes too big for her. She was stirring a black coffee with a wooden stick, her eyes darting toward the door every time the bell chimed. I approached the table slowly. Lydia? I asked. She flinched, the coffee sloshing over the rim of her cup. She looked up at me, and I saw a flash of recognition that made my stomach turn. She knew my face. She knew me not because we had met, but because she had studied me on paper. Sit down, she said, her voice low. Keep your voice down. I sat. I folded my hands on the table to stop them from shaking. You said on the phone that I was waking people up. I said, who am I waking up? Lydia reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a manila envelope. She didn't hand it to me immediately. She held it under her hand, pressing it into the laminate table. I worked as a junior administrator for the Family Placement Bureau in the 90s. Lydia said, it was a private agency. We handled sensitive cases, the kind that didn't go through the state foster system because the families involved had reputations to protect. And my family? I asked. Lydia looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. Your mother? Nadine Coleman told a story at a party, didn't she? That is what I heard through the grapevine. She made a joke about tax benefits. She said I was a smart investment. I said, Lydia nodded grimly, that wasn't a joke. Eleanor, it was a slip. But the truth is not that she adopted you for tax benefits. The truth is that she never adopted you at all. The noise of the espresso machine seemed to fade into a high-pitched whine in my ears. What do you mean? I asked. My father said he signed papers. He signed guardianship papers. Lydia said, there is a difference. A massive difference. She slid the envelope toward me. Open it. I undid the clasp. Inside was a photocopy of a ledger page. It looked like something from an old accounting book. The columns hand-drawn. Look at the column on the right. Lydia instructed. I ran my finger down the page. I saw my name. Eleanor Hart, minor. Next to it was a series of dates and dollar amounts. September 1994, $1,200. October 1994, $1,200. The payments continued, month after month, for years. The source column read, H, C, F, stipend, emergent care. What is this? I whispered. That is the money Nadine was paid to keep you. Lydia said. I stared at the numbers. She was paid? You were not an adoption case. Eleanor, you were a placement. Your birth mother, a woman named Camille Hart, was involved in a legal crisis. I cannot give you the details because the main file was shredded years ago, but the gist of it was that she needed you hidden. She needed you safe, and she needed it to be off the state books. Lydia leaned in closer. Nadine Coleman volunteered. She took you in, but she demanded a stipend for the burden. And because the placement was technically a temporary guardianship, intended to last only until the crisis passed, she was eligible for reimbursement from the donor fund, the Hawthorne Community Foundation. I felt the blood drain from my face. So she was a foster mom? I asked. No, Lydia said sharply. Foster moms are regulated. Foster moms have social workers checking the fridge. This was a private arrangement, a guardianship. It gave her custody. But it didn't make her your mother. It just made her your keeper. I looked at the ledger again. But she told everyone she adopted me. I said, that is where the fraud comes in. Lydia said, see? The crisis with your birth mother. It didn't resolve quickly. It dragged on. And Nadine realized that if she claimed you were adopted, she could file for federal tax credits. She could claim you as a dependent in a way that guardians sometimes cannot. So she lied? She created a narrative, Lydia corrected. She told the IRS one thing. She told the foundation another thing to keep the monthly checks coming. And she told the community a third thing, that she was the saint who saved a baby. She was double-dipping. Eleanor. She was getting the stipend for being a guardian, and she was likely taking the tax breaks for being a parent. I felt sick. I physically felt the urge to vomit. And my father? I asked. Martin? Lydia shrugged. He probably just signed what she put in front of him. Nadine was persuasive. She made it seem like she was handling the bureaucracy. I looked up at Lydia. Why are you telling me this? Lydia looked away. Out the window at the gray parking lot. Because I was the one who cut the checks, she said softly. I was 22. I didn't ask questions. I just processed the ledger. But I remember your name. And when I saw your petition hit the system, the automated alert goes to anyone listed as a former case manager. I knew you were walking into a trap. What kind of trap? Nadine isn't the only one involved, Lydia said. The people who funded that placement? The Hawthorne Group? They are powerful people in Briar Glen. If you expose that they were running an off-the-books placement ring for inconvenient children, you are going to destroy reputations that took generations to build. I don't want to destroy anyone. I said, I just want to know who I am. Lydia stood up. She buttoned her raincoat. You are Eleanor Hart, she said. You were a child someone loved enough to hide, and a child someone else loved enough to exploit. Be careful. Eleanor. She walked out of the cafe, leaving me with the ledger and a cold cup of coffee. I drove straight to Dana Rook's office. I didn't call ahead. The receptionist tried to stop me, but when Dana saw my face, she waved me back. I laid the ledger on her mahogany desk. Tell me what this means legally, I said. Dana put on her glasses. She studied the paper for a long time. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, she looked up. Her expression was grave. If this is authentic, she said, it confirms that your legal status was never finalized as an adoption. You were a ward. And the money? I asked. Dana took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. This is the problem. Eleanor, if Nadine was accepting stipends for guardianship while simultaneously filing taxes claiming you were her adopted child, she committed federal tax fraud. That is a felony. But it gets worse. How can it get worse? Did you ever sign financial aid forms for college? Dana asked. Did you ever sign a passport application? Did you ever list Nadine as your mother on a legal document? Of course. I said, all my life. Then you might be an unwitting accomplice. Dana said. I stood up. What? If you attested to a legal relationship that did not exist to gain a benefit, like federal student aid based on her income or insurance coverage, you technically committed fraud. Dana said, now, obviously, you didn't know. You were a victim of deception. But the law is a blunt instrument. If this blows up, the investigation will include you. I paced the small office. So I should just stop? I asked. I should just let her get away with it? No, Dana said, But you need to stop acting like a daughter asking for answers and start acting like a plaintiff building a case. You need criminal counsel. Eleanor, I handle family law. This is bleeding into white-collar crime. She wrote a name on a card and slid it across the desk. Call him. And for God's sake, do not talk to your mother. But Nadine wasn't waiting for me to talk to her. She was on the offensive. When I got home that evening, there was a package on my porch. It was wrapped in silver paper with a massive white bow. It looked like a wedding gift. I brought it inside but didn't open it. I stared at it like it was a bomb. Grant walked in a few minutes later. He saw the box and brightened. Is that from your mom? He asked. See? She is trying. Elle, don't touch it. I said. Grant rolled his eyes. He grabbed the card attached to the ribbon. My darling Eleanor. He read aloud. I know you have been stressed. I saw this and thought of you. Let us put the silliness behind us. I love you more than words, Mommy. He opened the box before I could stop him. Inside was a cashmere blanket. It was soft, luxurious, and exorbitantly expensive. And tucked into the folds was a framed photograph. Grant pulled it out. "Aw, look at this," he said. It was a picture of me as a baby, maybe 3 years old, sitting on Nadine's lap. She was looking down at me with a beatific smile, looking for all the world like the Madonna. I took the photo from him. I looked at her eyes. They were focused on the camera, not me. Check Facebook, I said, a sudden intuition hitting me. Why? Grant asked. Just check it. Grant pulled out his phone. He navigated to Nadine's profile. Oh, he said, what is it? She posted the same picture. Grant said, about an hour ago. Read the caption. I commanded. Grant cleared his throat. Throwback to the day my life truly began. Being a mother isn't about biology. It is about the choice to love when no one else will. So grateful for my chosen family. Adoption is love. My heart. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. She is baiting me. I said, she knows I'm digging. She is trying to lock in the narrative publicly. If I attack her now, I look like a monster attacking a saint. Grant put the phone down. Or maybe she just loves you. Eleanor, have you thought about that? Maybe she's just posting a nice picture? You don't get it, I snapped. She is circling the wagons. Grant, she is using the chosen family rhetoric to hide the fact that she was paid to keep me. Grant threw his hands up. I can't do this tonight. Eleanor, I really can't. You are seeing enemies where there is just a mother trying to apologize. He went upstairs. I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I took the day off work. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets when my own life was a falsified ledger. I drove to the Everline Memorial Hospital. It was the hospital listed on my copy of the birth certificate, the one that looked like a copy of a copy. The archives department was in the basement, a windowless room that smelled of dust and ozone. I filled out a request form for my medical records. I need the original admission records for my birth. I told the clerk, September 12th, 1992. The clerk, a young man with headphones around his neck, tapped on his keyboard. Coleman? He asked. Try Hart. I said, mother's name, Camille Hart. He typed again. He frowned. I have a file here. He said, but it is red tagged. What does that mean? It means I can't access it without an administrator override. It says sealed by court order 44B. Can you see who signed the order? I asked. He squinted at the screen. Looks like Judge Holloway. It is dated October 1992. Judge Holloway. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Is he still on the bench? I asked. No way. The clerk said. He retired like 10 years ago. I thanked him and left. I sat in my car in the parking garage and Googled Judge Holloway Briar Glen. Arthur Holloway, retired Superior Court judge. He was listed as a board member for several local charities, including, my heart stopped, the Hawthorne Community Foundation. Of course, I found an address for him. It was an estate in the hills. But I wasn't going to knock on his door. That was too aggressive. I needed a side door. I searched for his former staff. It took me 2 hours of digging through LinkedIn and old county directories. But I found a name. Beatrice Webb. She had been his clerk for 30 years. She was listed as living in a retirement community in Briar Glen. I drove there. I lied to the front desk, saying I was her niece coming for a visit. Beatrice was sitting on a bench in the community garden, pruning a rosebush. She was a bird-like woman with sharp eyes and hands that looked like twisted roots. "Mrs. Webb?" I asked. She looked up. "I don't have nieces," she said. "The front desk called me. You are the Coleman girl, aren't you?" I froze. "How do you know that?" "I know everyone," she said, turning back to her roses. "And you look like your mother. Your real mother. Not Nadine." I sat on the bench opposite her. "You know Camille?" "I saw her once," Beatrice said. "In chambers." She was crying. She was terrified. "I need to know about the court order." "Mrs. Webb?" Judge Holloway sealed my file. "Why?" Beatrice snipped a dead bloom. The sound was sharp. Final. Arthur didn't have a choice. She said, "The committee came to him." "The committee?" "The civic committee," she said, "the men who run this town. They said there was a situation involving a very prominent family, not yours. The other one, the one your mother was running from. They said it needed to be handled quietly. So they erased me?" I asked. "They relocated you," Beatrice corrected, "into a safe harbor. Nadine Coleman was the harbor. She was available. She was ambitious. She wanted into the inner circle. And taking you was the price of admission. So Holloway signed the order to protect the donors? To protect the people who paid Nadine?" Beatrice looked at me. "He signed it to prevent a scandal that would have burned this town down." She said, "Arthur is a good man, but he is a practical man." She pointed the shears at me. "You are pulling a thread, girl, and the whole sweater is going to unravel. Are you sure you want to be naked in the cold?" "I want the truth." I said. "Then stop looking for adoption papers," Beatrice said. "Look for the guardianship transfer. That is the document that matters. And check the dates." "What about the dates?" Beatrice smiled. A dry, humorless expression. "Nadine claims she got you when you were 2? After the crisis?" "Yes. Check the dates," Beatrice repeated. I left the retirement home with a buzzing in my ears. That night, alone in the house, Grant had gone to stay at a hotel to get some space. I sat on the floor of the living room. I opened a notebook. I needed to write this down. I needed to externalize the chaos in my head. I have spent 33 years performing gratitude. I wrote. The words stared back at me. Performing gratitude. That was it. That was the core of my relationship with Nadine. I had always felt like I was in debt. I had always felt like a rescue dog that needed to stop barking and be thankful for the kibble. She made me feel like a burden she graciously decided to carry. But she was paid to carry me. She was paid in money. She was paid in tax credits. And she was paid in social capital. I realized then that the abuse wasn't the yelling. It wasn't the criticism. It was the lie. It was the fundamental restructuring of reality that made me the debtor and her the creditor. I am not a bad investment. I wrote, pressing the pen so hard it tore the paper. I am the bank. The next day, the mail arrived. It was a thick envelope from the state archives. The request I had filed, the one the clerk said would take weeks, had arrived. Perhaps the automated alert had triggered an expedited rejection, or perhaps the system had simply spat something out before the humans could intervene. I sat on the kitchen floor and opened it. It wasn't a complete file. It was a partial abstract, a summary of documents found. There was a copy of a temporary custody grant. Minor, Eleanor Hart. Guardian, Nadine Coleman. Date, July 14th, 1994. I stared at the date. July 14th, 1994. Nadine always told the story that she met me in September of 1994. She said she walked into the house, saw me in the guest room, and fell in love. She said she didn't know I was coming until that moment, but she had signed for custody 2 months earlier. She knew. She had arranged it. The surprise was a lie. The guest room discovery was a lie. And then I saw the signature on the bottom of the page. It was Nadine's signature, bold, looping, confident, but below it, There was another signature, a witness, Arthur Halloway, the judge. He hadn't just sealed the file later. He had been there at the handover. He had facilitated the transaction, and the location of the signing wasn't a courthouse. It was listed as the Hawthorne Estate. I dropped the paper. I wasn't adopted. I wasn't even really fostered. I was a deal. I was a contract signed in a mansion by a judge and a social climber, traded like a commodity to solve a problem for powerful people. Nadine didn't save me. She purchased a roll. I looked at the empty kitchen. My birthday dinner felt like a lifetime ago. The woman who stood up and toasted her smart investment hadn't been making a joke. She had been gloating. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Grant. I didn't call Dana. I called the number Lydia had called me from. It went to voicemail. "Lydia," I said, "I have the custody grant. I have Halloway's signature, and I know about the Hawthorne Estate." I paused. I am not stopping. I am going to burn the sweater. I hung up. Outside. The wind was picking up, rattling the windows. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The confusion was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of someone who finally understood the rules of the game. Nadine wanted a war? She wanted to talk about investments? Fine, I was going to audit her. I drove to my mother's house on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a tactical decision. Tuesdays were her bridge club days, meaning she would be high on caffeine, gossip, and the adrenaline of social maneuvering. She would be sharp. But she would also be distracted. Her mind already busy cataloging the failures of her friends. I wanted to catch her in that transition state, where the mask was secure but the underlying architecture was brittle. Her house was a sprawling colonial in the Heights, a structure that screamed old money even though I now knew the mortar was mixed with fraud. I parked in the driveway, behind her pristine Lexus. The vanity plate read, GRT-FUL. Grateful. It was a command, not a feeling. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled of lemon verbena and floor wax. "Mother?" I called out. She was in the sunroom, arranging hydrangeas in a crystal vase. The afternoon light hit her silver hair, creating a halo that felt blasphemous given what I knew. "Eleanor," she said, not looking up. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I thought you were busy sulking about your birthday." I did not sit down. I stood in the doorway, blocking her exit. I went to the state archives. I said, Nadine snipped a stem. "Snip. Good for you." "Darling, taking an interest in local history?" "My history." I said, "I found the custody grant." "Nadine, I know about the Hawthorne Estate, and I know one other thing." She finally looked up. Her expression was bored, mild. "And what is that?" My original last name was not Coleman. I said, "It was Hart." The reaction was microscopic. But to a daughter trained to read her mother's moods like weather patterns, it was a thunderclap. Her left eye twitched. The hand holding the shears froze for a fraction of a second. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving the rouge standing out like bruises. Panic. It was pure, unadulterated panic. But Nadine was a master of the recovery. In the span of a heartbeat, the panic vanished, replaced by a flash of scorching rage. She slammed the shears down on the table. The glass table rang out. A sharp, dangerous sound. "Hart?" she spat. "You are digging up names from 30 years ago? Are you insane?" "I am not insane," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am thorough. You signed a guardianship paper. Nadine, you were paid a stipend. You didn't adopt me. You were hired." Nadine walked around the table, her heels clicking on the tile. She advanced on me until she was inches away. She smelled of expensive flowers and gin. "You ungrateful little wretch," she hissed. "I saved you. Do you understand that? I saved you from a life of absolute squalor. I took you in when nobody else wanted the burden." "Who is Camille Hart?" I asked. Nadine laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Camille Hart was a disaster. She said, "A drug addict, a criminal. She threw you away. Eleanor, she handed you over like a bag of used clothes. And I stepped up. I gave you this house. I gave you your education. I gave you a life. But you were paid, I said. You took money from the Hawthorne Foundation. I was compensated for expenses, she shouted. Do you have any idea how much a child costs? The food, the clothes, the endless needs? You were a bottomless pit of need. Eleanor, of course I took the stipend. It was the least they could do for the woman cleaning up the mess. They? I asked. Who are they? She stopped. She realized she had said too much. Her face smoothed out, the rage receding behind a wall of icy martyrdom. You are digging for drama. Eleanor, she said, turning her back to me, you are bored with your little life. So you are trying to invent a tragedy. It is pathetic. Go home. I didn't leave immediately. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had been recording since I walked in the door. In our state, only one party needed to consent to a recording, and I consented. I am going to find her. Nadine, I said to her back, I am going to find Camille. Nadine didn't turn around. She is dead, she said flatly. She died years ago. Let it go. I walked out. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from adrenaline. I sat in my car and replayed the recording. She threw you away. She handed you over. Then, 30 seconds later, I took you in when nobody else wanted the burden. And then, the slip. It was the least they could do. She was protecting a collective, the civic committee Mrs. Webb had mentioned. But the biggest contradiction was the tone. When she spoke about Camille Hart, her voice wasn't just angry. It was defensive. You don't get defensive about a drug addict who abandoned a child. You get defensive about a rival. I drove to a park halfway between Nadine's house and mine. I needed to think. I called Lydia Sutter. She picked up on the first ring. Did you do it? Lydia asked. I confronted her. I said, she claims Camille Hart was an addict who threw me away. She claims she died years ago. Lydia let out a long sigh. She is lying about the death. Eleanor, at least, as far as the paperwork goes. The last update I saw in the old system, before the shredding started, was from 10 years ago. Camille was alive. And the addict part? Lydia hesitated. Look, the narrative in the file was that the mother was unstable. But unstable in that world can mean a lot of things. It can mean drugs, yes. Or it can mean she pissed off the wrong people and got committed. Or it can mean she was poor and inconvenient. She told me something else. Lydia continued, there is something you need to know. Something that got hushed up fast. What? About 4 years after you were placed with Nadine, so you would have been 6, there was a legal inquiry. A couple from the city, wealthy philanthropists. I think their name was Warren. They filed a petition to assume guardianship of you. Why? I asked. They claimed they had a prior relationship with your birth mother. Lydia said. They said they had been looking for you. They were ready to take you. Eleanor, they had the money, the lawyers, everything. What happened? The case vanished, Lydia said. One day it was on the docket. The next day it was gone. Rumor was there was a massive settlement. The Warrens withdrew their petition. And suddenly Nadine's house got a new roof, and she started driving a Mercedes. I felt the air leave my lungs. She sold me. I whispered. She didn't sell you, Lydia corrected. She successfully defended her asset. You were the golden goose. Eleanor, if she lost you to the Warrens, she lost the stipend, the tax credits, and the connection to the Hawthorne money. She fought to keep you not because she loved you, but because she couldn't afford to lose the income stream. I hung up. I stared at the playground in front of me. Mothers were pushing children on swings. It looked so simple. I went home. I needed to follow the money. If Nadine had received a settlement, or if she was leveraging my identity for loans, it would show up in property records. I logged into the county assessor's database. It was public record, accessible to anyone with an internet connection and $20. I pulled the deed history for Nadine's house. There was the original purchase in 1988, then a series of small mortgages, then, 6 months ago, a massive refinancing. She had taken out a line of credit against the equity, $300,000. I looked at the lender name. It wasn't a bank. It was a private trust. The Hart Coleman Preservation Trust. I stared at the screen. Hart Coleman. She was using my birth name, the name she claimed belonged to a dead addict, combined with her own name to create a financial vehicle. I ran a search on the trust. It was registered to a P.O. box in Briar Glen. The trustee was Nadine Coleman. The beneficiary? Eleanor Hart. She had refinanced her home using a trust that was technically in my name. She was borrowing money from herself, or rather, from the identity she had stolen from me. Likely to bypass credit checks or tax implications, the front door opened. It was Grant. He walked in, looking lighter than he had in weeks. He was carrying a bottle of champagne. "Babe," he called out, "you are not going to believe this." I closed the laptop. I wasn't ready to explain the trust to him. He wouldn't understand. He would see it as savvy estate planning, not identity theft. "What is it?" I asked, walking into the kitchen. "Your mom just called me," Grant said, beaming. She sounded really emotional. She said she wants to bury the hatchet. She offered to write a check for the entire wedding catering bill. $15,000. Eleanor. I froze. "You didn't accept it, did you?" Grant's smile faltered. "I told her that was incredibly generous and we would talk about it. But Eleanor, come on. 15 grand? That frees up so much cash for the house down payment." She said she just wants to help. She said she knows she can be difficult and she wants to make it right. She is buying you. "Grant," I said, my voice rising. "Oh, stop it." Grant groaned. He slammed the champagne bottle onto the counter. "Not everything is a conspiracy. She is your mother. She wants to pay for dinner. Why do you have to turn everything into a war?" "Because she is afraid," I shouted. "She knows I'm close to the truth, so she is trying to bribe you to get me to back off. It is control, Grant. It is always control." Grant looked at me with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "You know what I think?" he said softly. "I think you're addicted to the drama. I think you like feeling like the victim because it makes you feel special. Nadine is reaching out. If you slap her hand away this time." "I don't know if I can defend you." "Defend me?" I asked. "You are supposed to be my partner." "Then act like a partner," he said. "Stop tearing our lives apart over a paperwork error from 30 years ago. Take the money. Make peace. Let's get married and be normal." He walked out of the kitchen. I stood there, vibrating with anger. Normal. That was all he wanted. He wanted the facade. He didn't care that the foundation was rotten. I called Marisol. "I need a war room," I said. 30 minutes later, I was at Marisol's apartment. Her husband, David, was out. We spread the papers on her dining table. The ledger copy from Lydia, the trust printout, the credit report. "We need a timeline," Marisol said, uncapping a red marker. She drew a line across a large sheet of poster paper. 1992. Born, 1994. Guardianship signed. Stipends begin, 1998. The Warrens try to intervene. Case settles. Stipends increase, 2010. College, financial aid fraud, present day. The trust, the refinance. "It is a business," Marisol said, stepping back. She looked horrified. She wasn't raising a child. She was managing a portfolio. "Look at the gaps," I said, pointing to the years between 1998 and 2010. The stipends likely continued until I was 18. That is, I did the math in my head. $1,200 a month, times 12 months, times 14 years, over $200,000. I said, just in base stipends, plus the tax credits she claimed by saying I was adopted, plus the settlement money from the Warrens, plus whatever she is doing with this trust now. She built her life on you," Marisol said. "If you expose this, you are not just embarrassing her, you are bankrupting her. She will have to pay it all back. The taxes, the fraud. She could go to prison. That is why she is panicked." I said, "It is not about love, it is about liability." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Marisol pointed to the first entry, 1994. "Where were you before 1994? Marisol asked. "You were 2 years old." "Where were you for the first 2 years?" "I don't know." I said, "Martin would know." Marisol said. I had already asked Martin. He said Nadine brought me home. But Martin was a passive observer. He saw what he wanted to see, but Martin was also a hoarder. I went back to Martin's condo the next day. I didn't ask him for permission. I used the key and went straight to the pull-down ladder for the attic. Martin was at the grocery store. I had maybe an hour. The attic was stiflingly hot, smelling of fiberglass and old paper. I ignored the boxes of Christmas decorations and Nadine's old clothes. I looked for the oldest-looking box. I found a battered cardboard crate labeled Photos, Early Years. I sat on the floorboards, sweat trickling down my back, and flipped through the albums. Most were of Martin and Nadine before me, vacations in Cabo, dinner parties. Then, a loose envelope at the bottom. It had no label. I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed a toddler. Me, undeniably me, with my wild curls and wide eyes. Sitting on a plaid blanket in a park, I was holding a plastic sippy cup, but I wasn't alone. A woman was sitting next to me. She was turned slightly away from the camera, but I could see her profile. She had dark hair, pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a denim jacket. Her hand was resting on my back, a protective, heavy touch. She didn't look like an addict. She didn't look crazy. She looked tired. I flipped the photo over, in handwriting that was jagged and rushed. Not Nadine's loops, not Martin's block letters. Someone had written, "She will come back when it is safe." I stared at the words, "She will come back." It wasn't an abandonment. It was a loan. Someone had given me up thinking it was temporary. When it is safe, Nadine had turned a temporary safety measure into a permanent acquisition. She had run out the clock, or maybe she had ensured it never became safe. I pocketed the photo and climbed down. I met Dana Rook at her office an hour later. I showed her the photo. This changes the intent. Dana said, if the biological mother intended to return, and Nadine blocked it or misled the court to convert the guardianship, that is kidnapping by fraud. I need to find her. Dana, I need to find Camille Hart. Dana nodded. We are not going to use Google, she said, if she is hiding, or if she was erased. Google won't help. We are going to use a confidential intermediary. What is that? It is a court-appointed official who has the right to unseal adoption and birth records to locate biological relatives. Dana explained. They act as a go-between. If they find her, they ask for her consent to be contacted. If she says yes, you get her details. If she says no, she won't say no. I said, touching the pocket where the photo burned against my hip. She wanted to come back. Dana filled out the petition. This will take a few days to process, she said. But Eleanor, are you ready for what you might find? Nadine said she was an addict. Nadine is a liar. I said, I went home. The house was empty. Grant was still at work. Or maybe avoiding me. I placed the Polaroid on the kitchen counter. I wanted Grant to see it. I wanted him to see that I wasn't crazy. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I expected Grant. I expected a delivery. I opened the door. It was Nadine. She wasn't wearing her usual armor of sequins or silk. She was wearing a trench coat, belted tightly. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked dangerous. Can I come in? She asked. It wasn't a request. I stepped back. She walked into the hallway, bringing the cold air with her. She saw the Polaroid on the counter. She didn't gasp. She walked over to it, picked it up, and looked at it with a strange detachment. You went through Martin's attic, she said. He never did know how to throw things away. Who is she? I asked. Nadine dropped the photo back onto the counter. She was nobody. Eleanor. She was a frightened girl who made a mistake. And you capitalized on it, I said. Nadine turned to me. The mask was gone. There was no warmth, no fake motherly affection, just the cold, hard calculation of a predator cornered. You think you are so smart, she said softly. You think you have solved the puzzle, but you have no idea what you are dealing with. I know about the money, Nadine. I know about the trust. I know you weren't my mother. You were my jailer. Nadine stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You have a nice life here, Eleanor. You have a fiancé. You have a career. You have a reputation. Is that a threat? It is a reality check. If you keep pushing this, if you drag the Hawthorne name and my name through the mud, I will not go down alone." She smiled. And it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "Drop this, Eleanor, or I will tell everyone what you really are." "What I am?" I asked. "I am your victim." "No," Nadine said. "You are the daughter of a monster. And if you force me to open that file, if you force me to testify, I will tell the world exactly where you came from. I will tell Grant. I will tell your boss. I will tell the papers." She buttoned her coat. "You think shame is something you can use against me?" she asked. "I invented shame." "Darling, you have until the wedding to decide. If you walk down that aisle without dropping this inquiry, I will burn your world to the ground." She walked out the door, slamming it behind her. I stood in the silence of the hallway. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. I will tell everyone what you really are. She was using the mystery of my origin as a weapon. She was betting that I was more afraid of my biological history than I was of her. She was betting that shame would work, because it had always worked. But as I looked at the Polaroid, at the woman's hand resting protectively on my back, I realized something. Nadine didn't know love. She only knew leverage. And she had just handed me the final proof that I had nothing to lose. I wasn't afraid of what I was. I was only afraid of becoming her. I picked up the phone and texted Dana. "File the petition. Tonight." The waiting was the hardest part. After Dana filed the petition for the confidential intermediary, time seemed to liquefy, moving in slow, agonizing drips. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I nodded at spreadsheets. But my mind was entirely elsewhere, suspended in a state of quantum uncertainty where I was both the daughter of a monster and the daughter of a ghost. Grant had moved back into the house, but he was moving through the rooms like a polite roommate. We avoided the topic of Nadine. We avoided the topic of the wedding. We existed in a truce of silence, neither of us willing to detonate the landmine sitting on the kitchen table. Then, on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after the petition was filed, Dana called. Her voice was professional, clipped, but I could hear the undercurrent of adrenaline. "Eleanor," she said, "can you come to my office? We have a response. I left work without asking for permission. I told my manager I had a family emergency," which was technically the truest thing I had ever said. When I arrived at Dana's office, she didn't make me wait. She ushered me into her private conference room. There was a manila envelope on the table. "We found her," Dana said. I sat down, my knees suddenly feeling like water. "Is she alive?" "She is alive." Dana confirmed. "She is living in another state, under a married name." The intermediary made contact. She was emotional. She declined a direct phone call for now, citing privacy concerns for her current family, but she agreed to communicate through counsel. She pushed the envelope toward me. She sent a letter. "Eleanor, it is addressed to the court, but she included a statement specifically for you." My hands shook as I reached for it. The envelope was heavy, formal. I opened it carefully, sliding out the stiff legal stationery. Attached to the formal legal response was a handwritten letter on plain blue paper. The handwriting was looped and jagged, identical to the note on the back of the Polaroid I had found in the attic. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means the wall has finally come down. I have spent 30 years praying for this day and 30 years dreading it. I need you to know the first and most important thing. I did not throw you away. I did not sell you. And I was never an addict, no matter what stories were told to justify the erasure. I was 22 years old. I was in a legal dispute with a man who had the power to crush me, and by extension, you. I was told that if I kept you, you would be taken by the state. Or worse, I was told that the only way to keep you safe was to place you in a temporary private guardianship until the storm passed. I signed the papers because I loved you enough to let you go for a little while. I was told it was for 6 months. When I came back 6 months later, the doors were locked. The judge who oversaw the arrangement told me that my rights had been terminated for your best interests, and that if I tried to contact you, I would be arrested for harassment, and you would be moved to a facility where I would never find you. They used my poverty as a weapon. They used my fear as a leash. I walked away because I truly believed that staying away was the only way to keep you safe from the people who wanted to hurt us. I have thought of you every single day. I am not asking for a place in your life. I have no right to disrupt the peace you have built. I only wanted you to know that you were never a tax benefit. You were the love of my life, yours always. Camille. I put the letter down. I couldn't breathe. I felt a pressure in my chest that was so intense it felt like my ribs were cracking. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't neglect. It was power. It was a 22-year-old girl up against a system designed to grind her into dust. Dana handed me a box of tissues. She didn't say anything. She let me cry. A silent, heaving grief that had been waiting inside me for 3 decades. When I finally wiped my face, the grief had hardened into something cold and sharp. She came back. I whispered. She came back for me. And they threatened her. It fits the pattern. Dana said gently. We call it constructive termination. They make the barriers to entry so high, and the threats so severe, that the biological parent has no choice but to retreat. It is not legal, strictly speaking, but it is effective. And Nadine? I asked. Where does she fit in? Dana opened a file folder. I have been looking into the fraud aspect. Eleanor, based on what Camille says, and based on the ledger you found, we have a working theory. She laid out a series of diagrams on the table. Nadine had a guardianship, Dana explained, that entitled her to the stipend from the Hawthorne Foundation, but to claim the federal tax credits, the big ones, she would have needed to file as an adoptive parent. But she never adopted me. I said, exactly, Dana said, which means she likely forged an adoption decree for the IRS, or she relied on the fact that back in the 90s, the cross-checks between state courts and the federal tax system were much looser. She claimed you as an adopted child to the government to get the tax breaks. While maintaining you as a ward to the foundation to get the stipend, she was double-dipping. I said, she was committing multiple felonies, Dana corrected. She was collecting money to care for a ward while claiming the tax benefits of a parent, and if she used your identity for that trust. Dana leaned back. She is exposed. Eleanor, completely exposed. If we prove this, she loses everything, the house, the assets, her reputation. She could go to prison. I looked at the blue letter again. They used my poverty as a weapon. I am not going to let her spin this. I said, if I go public now, she will cry. She will say she saved me from a dangerous situation. She will say Camille is lying. She will make herself the martyr who made the hard choices. So what do you want to do? Dana asked. I want to close the trap. I said, I want it to be so tight that she can't wiggle out. I want the evidence to be undeniable before I say a word. Dana nodded. Then we need to map the money. I know an investigator, Parker Wren. He specializes in forensic accounting for high-conflict divorces and fraud. He can trace the funds. I met Parker Wren the next day. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, but the inside was lined with high-end servers and monitors. Parker was a man who looked like he slept in his suit, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made him tap his foot constantly. He pulled up a digital map on a large screen. It looked like a spider web. Your mother is messy, Parker said, pointing to a cluster of red lines. Sophisticated, but messy. She thought nobody would ever look, so she didn't bother to clean up the trails. Show me, I said. Here, Parker said, highlighting a node labeled 1998. This is the settlement year you mentioned. I found a deposit into a shell company called NC Consulting for $50,000. The source is obscured, but it roots back to a law firm associated with the Warren family. The philanthropists, I said, the ones who wanted to adopt me. She took a payoff to make them go away. Parker said, but look at this. He pointed to a recurring transaction. For 12 years, she received checks from the Youth Placement Fund. But here is the kicker. She also filed for special needs adoption assistance from the state for 3 of those years. Special needs? I asked. I don't have special needs. Parker shrugged. On paper you did. She claimed you had emotional trauma requiring intensive therapy. That qualifies for extra state funding. Did you ever go to therapy? No. I said, never. She said therapy was for weak people. Parker grimaced. She pocketed it. She claimed you were damaged to get the cash, and then refused to get you help because it would have cost her money. He zoomed out on the map. And the trust. He said, the Hart-Coleman Preservation Trust. It is not just the house. She has a brokerage account tied to it. It looks like she used your identity to stash assets she didn't want Martin to touch during the divorce. She hid money in your name. Eleanor, how much? Mid-6 figures, Parker said. I stared at the screen. It was a portrait of my life, reduced to transactions, every milestone, my first day of school, my 16th birthday, my graduation, was just another fiscal quarter for Nadine Coleman. She isn't a mother. I said, she is a hedge fund manager. I left Parker's office with a USB drive containing the full report. I had the weapon. Now I needed the witness. I called Martin. I need you to come over. I said. He arrived 20 minutes later. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. He knew. He had always known. Deep down, I sat him at the kitchen table. I didn't offer him coffee. I put the blue letter from Camille in front of him. Read it. I said. Martin put on his reading glasses. His hands shook as he held the paper. I watched him read. I watched the color drain from his face. I watched the tears start to fall, splashing onto the cheap laminate table. She told me Camille was dead. Martin whispered. She swore to me. She lied. Dad, she lied about everything. Martin put the letter down and put his head in his hands. I was so afraid of her. He sobbed. I was so afraid that if I asked questions, she would take you away. She always threatened that. She said, if you push me, Martin, I will leave and take the girl, and you will never see her again. So you sacrificed me to keep me? I asked, cruel. But necessary. I thought I was protecting you. He said, I thought we were a family. We were a business, Dad, and you were the silent partner. Martin looked up. His face was ravaged by guilt. I am sorry. Ellie, I am so sorry. I don't want your apology. I said, I want your voice. What do you mean? I am going to expose her. I said, not with a temper tantrum, with a legal wrecking ball. I have the financial records. I have Camille's statement, but I need someone to testify that Nadine controlled the narrative. I need someone to say, on the record, that she forbade you from asking about the adoption papers. Martin wiped his eyes. He looked at the letter again. He looked at me. She will destroy me, he said. She knows everything about me. She will humiliate me. She has already humiliated us, I said. The only question is whether you want to die a coward or live as my father. Martin took a deep breath. He straightened his shoulders. It was a small movement, but it felt seismic. I will testify, he said. I will tell them everything. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time I had touched him in weeks. Thank you. The next day, Nadine made her move. She didn't storm the house again. She didn't threaten. She pivoted, just as she always did. I received a text message at 10 in the morning. Eleanor, darling, I have been doing some thinking. We need to clear the air. Please, meet me for lunch at the conservatory, just the two of us. I have a proposition that I think you will find very interesting. Noon. I showed the text to Grant. You should go, he said immediately. See? She wants to fix it. I looked at him. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a family squabble. He didn't understand it was a hostage negotiation. I am going, I said, but not to make peace. The conservatory was the most expensive restaurant in Briar Glen, a glass-walled palace of ferns and linen where the waiters whispered and the water was imported from glaciers. Nadine was waiting at a corner table. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed, "Innocent matriarch." She stood up when I approached. Offering a cheek? I didn't kiss her. I sat down. Nadine's smile didn't waver. She sat down, smoothing her napkin over her lap. You look tired. Darling, she said, this stress does not suit you. What is the proposition? Nadine? I asked. I'm not here for the salad. Nadine sighed, picking up her menu. So direct. You get that from me. You know, Camille was always so flighty. Don't say her name. I said. Nadine put the menu down. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at me with an expression that was almost admiring. Fine. Let us talk business. She reached into her purse and pulled out a leather folder. She slid it across the table. I have been speaking with my estate planner. She said, and I realized that I've been holding on to things too tightly. I want to simplify my life, and I want to ensure your future. I didn't open the folder. What is in here? The deed to the house in the Heights, she said casually. Transfer of title to you, effective immediately, and a restructuring of the trust, the one you found. I am prepared to sign over full control of the assets to you. I stared at her. The house was worth $2 million. The trust, Parker had said, was mid-six figures. She was offering me nearly $3 million. And what do you want in return? I asked. Nadine took a sip of her sparkling water. A signature, she said. On what? A simple statement. She said, a retraction. Just a document saying that you were confused, that the emotional strain of the wedding caused you to misinterpret old family documents, and that you fully acknowledge the legitimacy of our family history. She leaned forward. It stops the inquiry. Eleanor, it seals the records again. We go back to being a family. You get the house, you get the money, you get the wedding of your dreams. Grant will be happy, Martin will be happy, everyone wins. I looked at the folder. It was a golden parachute. It was everything I had ever thought I wanted. Financial security, approval, the family fortune. All I had to do was agree that I was crazy. All I had to do was erase Camille again. It was a brilliant play. She knew exactly what Grant wanted. She knew exactly what society valued. I opened the folder. I looked at the documents. They were drawn up perfectly. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of trustee powers. It is a lot of money. Eleanor, Nadine said softly, you could quit that job you hate. You could start your own firm. You could be free. I looked up at her. Free? I asked. Yes, darling, free. I closed the folder. I placed my hand on top of it. For a moment, Nadine looked triumphant. She thought she had closed the deal. She thought everyone had a price. Because she had a price. I pushed the folder back across the table. Nadine's smile faltered. Eleanor, don't be stupid. This is generational wealth. I am not stupid. Nadine, I said, my voice calm, steady, and loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. I am just not for sale. Nadine's eyes narrowed. You are making a mistake. No, I said, the mistake was thinking you could buy me twice. You bought me when I was 2, and you thought that gave you the receipt for my soul. But the warranty has expired. I stood up. You don't get to purchase my identity. I said, not for $3 million, not for $300 million, Nadine hissed. A low, snake-like sound. If you walk out of here, you get nothing. You hear me? I will cut you off. I will bury you in legal fees. I will ruin you. I looked down at her. She looked small. She looked terrified. You can try, I said, but I have the ledger. I have the judge. I have Martin. And I have Camille. I leaned in closer. And I have the truth. You are over-leveraged, mother, and the margin call is coming. I turned and walked away. I heard her chair scrape against the floor as she stood up, but I didn't look back. I walked out of the restaurant, past the maitre d' who looked alarmed, and out into the bright, blinding sunshine. I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Grant. Nadine had probably texted him the moment I refused. I didn't call him back. I walked to my car, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure, unadulterated freedom. I had just turned down millions of dollars. I had just declared war on the most powerful woman I knew. But as I unlocked my car door, I knew one thing for certain. She was going to hit back. She was going to hit back hard. And she was going to hit back fast. She wouldn't use money this time. She would use the only weapon she had left: reputation. She was going to try to paint me as the villain before I could prove I was the victim. I started the engine. Let her try. The fallout began before I had even started my car engine outside the conservatory. My phone lit up with a text from my Aunt Sarah. "Eleanor, your mother just called me in tears. She says you are having a breakdown. Please, honey, just go home and rest. We can find you a good doctor." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Nadine wasn't wasting time. She knew that in Briar Glen, the truth didn't matter as much as the first version of the story to hit the grapevine. She was painting me as the unstable daughter, the hysteric, the bride cracking under the pressure of her upcoming nuptials. It was a strategic masterstroke. If I spoke out now, anything I said about tax fraud or false identities would be dismissed as the ravings of a woman off her medication. But Nadine had made a critical error. She assumed I was playing the same game she was, a social game. She thought I would try to win people over at dinner parties or bridge clubs. I wasn't interested in winning the country club vote. I was interested in federal law. I drove straight to Dana Rook's office. I walked in without an appointment, my blood running cold and steady. "File it," I said. Dana looked up from her desk. She saw the set of my jaw, the way I stood with my weight evenly distributed. "Ready for a fight? The whistleblower complaint?" she asked. "The IRS complaint, the civil fraud suit, and the petition for identity theft." I listed all of it. "I want it stamped, filed, and entered into the public record by 5 o'clock today." Dana nodded slowly. "Once we file, Eleanor, it is a declaration of war. The moment those documents hit the clerk's office, they become discoverable. Journalists can see them. Her business partners can see them." "Good," I said. "She is telling everyone I am having a mental breakdown. I need the first public document with my name on it to be a forensic accounting of her crimes. Not a prescription for sedatives." We spent the next 4 hours finalizing the exhibits. We attached the ledger page Lydia had given me. We attached the copy of the trust documents. We attached the credit report showing the loan in Oak Haven. At 4:15, Dana hit submit on the federal portal. "It is done," she said. I felt a strange weightlessness. I had just dropped a bomb on my own life. "Now," I said, "I need to correct the record with the people who matter." I didn't go home to Grant. I couldn't face his willful blindness yet. Instead, I called Marisol. "I need your living room," I said. Tonight, I sent 5 text messages, 1 to Martin, 1 to Grant, 1 to Lydia Sutter, and 2 to the couple who had sat next to me at the birthday dinner, my cousins Peter and Julia, who had been the primary audience for Nadine's tax benefit joke. "Please meet me at Marisol Vance's home at 7 o'clock. I have a statement to read regarding the family situation. It is not a social gathering." I turned off my phone. At 7 o'clock, Marisol's living room felt like a tribunal. Martin sat in the corner, staring at his hands. Grant was pacing by the window, looking furious and embarrassed. Lydia sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her purse. Peter and Julia looked confused, whispering to each other. I stood in front of the fireplace. I wasn't wearing a power suit. I was wearing the jeans and sweater I had fled lunch in. I wanted them to see me as I was, stripped of the costume Nadine had dressed me in for 33 years. "Thank you for coming," I began. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "Eleanor," Grant interrupted, stepping forward. "This is insane. You are dragging people into our personal drama. Nadine is calling everyone, crying her eyes out. Can we just go home? Sit down." "Grant," I said. He froze. He had never heard that tone from me before. It wasn't a request. I waited until he sat. "My mother is currently telling people that I am suffering from a mental health crisis," I said. "She is claiming that my questions about my past are delusions brought on by stress. I asked you here so that you can hear the truth from me, supported by evidence, before the rumors become facts." I picked up a folder. "I was not adopted by Nadine and Martin Coleman," I said. "I was placed in their care under a temporary guardianship arrangement in 1994. This arrangement was intended to be short-term, to protect me during a legal crisis involving my biological mother. Martin made a small, choked sound in the corner. However, I continued. Nadine Coleman realized that my presence was financially advantageous. She accepted monthly stipends from the Hawthorne Community Foundation for my care. Simultaneously, she represented herself as my adoptive mother to the federal government to claim tax credits. She effectively was paid twice, once to be a guardian, and once to be a parent. Peter raised his hand, looking pale. Ellie, are you saying she stole you? I am saying she managed me. I corrected. She blocked my biological mother from returning by using legal threats and the influence of a judge named Arthur Halloway. And she created a narrative of abandonment to ensure I would be grateful for the roof over my head. A roof, I might add, that was paid for in part by the very funds intended for my care. I held up the ledger. This is the accounting record, I said. Then I held up the credit report. And this, I said, is a credit report showing that Nadine used my identity, my social security number, to open lines of credit and recently to refinance her home using a trust in my name. Grant stood up again. Refinance? He asked. The $300,000? Yes, I said. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I am not having a breakdown. I said, I am the victim of a 30-year financial fraud scheme orchestrated by the woman we all call my mother. I have filed formal complaints with the IRS and the civil courts as of this afternoon. Just then, the front door flew open. We hadn't locked it. Marisol had been expecting her husband to come home, but it wasn't David. It was Nadine. She stood in the entryway, framed by the dark night. She was wearing a black dress and a pearl necklace, looking like she was dressed for a wake. Her face was a mask of tragic fury. I knew you would be here, she said, her voice trembling with theatrical rage. I knew you would try to poison them. She walked into the room, ignoring Marisol, ignoring Lydia. She looked only at me. How dare you, she whispered, after everything I did? After the schools, the clothes, the car? I gave you a life. Eleanor, and you repay me by slandering me to the IRS? I didn't shout back. I didn't cry. I looked at her with the clinical detachment of a prosecutor. I didn't slander you. Nadine, I said, I audited you. Nadine turned to the room, spreading her hands. She is sick. She pleaded to Peter and Julia. Can't you see it? She is paranoid. She thinks there are conspiracies everywhere. I have the adoption papers at home. I have them in a safe. Show us, Martin said. The voice came from the corner. It was quiet, shaking, but clear. Nadine whipped around. She hadn't seen him. Martin, she hissed, you are part of this? Show us the decree. Nadine, Martin said, standing up. He looked old, tired, and broken, but he was standing. I never saw it. In 18 years. I never saw a judge's stamp. You always said you filed it. Show us. Nadine's eyes darted around the room. She saw the doubt in Peter's face. She saw the horror in Julia's. She saw the cold judgment in Lydia's. I don't have to prove anything to you people, she spat. I am the mother here. I am the one who cleaned up the vomit and paid the tuition. And took the stipend, Lydia said. Nadine froze. She looked at Lydia, squinting. I know you, Nadine said slowly. You were the little secretary, the one at the agency. I was the administrator, Lydia corrected. I wrote the checks. Nadine, $1,200 a month, emergent care stipend. I kept the ledger. Nadine's face crumbled. For a second, just a second, the facade dissolved, and underneath was a terrified woman who knew the walls were closing in. But she pivoted. She always pivoted. I did it for her, Nadine screamed, pointing at me. I needed the money to give her the life she deserved. Do you think raising a child is free? Do you think I could have sent her to private school on Martin's salary? I leveraged the system to help her. You leveraged my identity to help yourself. I said. I picked up a piece of paper from the table. It was the report Parker Wren had given me that morning. Nadine, I said, Parker Wren found something interesting today. "Who is Parker Wren?" she demanded. "He is a forensic accountant." I said, "He found a credit inquiry from 3 weeks ago, an attempt to open a high-limit credit card in the name of Eleanor Hart." Nadine went still. 3 weeks ago. I repeated. "I am 33 years old. I am an adult. I have my own money. Why were you trying to open a credit line in my birth name 3 weeks ago?" Nadine didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because there was no "I did it for the child" defense for identity theft committed against a 33-year-old woman. It wasn't for me. I said, "It was never for me. You are broke, Nadine. You spent the settlement. You spent the stipends. You spent the trust. And now you are trying to bleed the stone one last time before I get married and change my name." Nadine looked at Grant. "Grant," she said, her voice syrupy and desperate, "you are a sensible man. You know how expensive the wedding is. I was trying to help. I wanted to surprise you with the honeymoon money." Grant looked at her. He looked at the credit report in my hand. He looked at the woman who had offered him $15,000 just 2 days ago to shut me up. "You offered to pay for the catering," Grant said slowly. "With a credit card you opened in Eleanor's name?" He laughed. It was a dark, incredulous sound. "You were going to pay for our wedding with Eleanor's own credit rating." Nadine straightened her spine. She adjusted her pearls. She realized she had lost the room. "You are all ungrateful," she said, her voice turning to ice. "I carried this family. I made the hard choices, and this is the thanks I get? A witch hunt?" She turned to me. "You will regret this. Eleanor, when the lawyers are done with you, you will wish you had stayed in the gutter where I found you." She turned on her heel and walked out. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing with the echoes of her exit. Peter stood up. He looked like he was going to be sick. "I have to go," he said. I have to call my dad." They left. Lydia squeezed my hand and slipped out the back. Martin walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "I am proud of you." "Ellie," he whispered. He left, leaving me alone with Grant and Marisol. Marisol went to the kitchen to give us space. Grant sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. "I am sorry," he said into his palms. I stood by the fireplace, watching the embers die. "You knew," I said. Grant looked up. "I didn't know about the fraud. Eleanor, I swear, I knew there were rumors. My mom mentioned once that Nadine's money always seemed to come from nowhere, and there was talk about the adoption being unconventional. But you told me to stop," I said. "You told me to take the money. You told me to make peace. I just wanted us to be happy," Grant pleaded. "I didn't want a war. I thought if we just ignored it, it would go away. And that is the problem, Grant," I said. "You value comfort more than truth." I looked at the engagement ring on my finger. It was a beautiful ring. Nadine had helped him pick it out. She had probably gotten a commission on it. I took it off. "Eleanor, don't," Grant said, standing up. "We can get through this. She is gone. We can be free of her. I am free of her." I said, "But I can't be with a man who watched me drowning and told me to stop making waves." I placed the ring on the coffee table. It made a small, sharp click. "I need a partner who fights for me. Grant, not one who negotiates with my abuser." I walked out of Marisol's house into the cool night air. I didn't have a fiancé. I didn't have a mother. I didn't have a home, really. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. The next few days were a blur of legal motion. The filing of the complaint had triggered exactly what Dana predicted. The IRS takes whistleblower complaints very seriously, especially when they come with forensic ledgers attached. The phrase tax fraud began to circulate in the quiet, manicured streets of Briar Glen. But the real damage was social. Nadine's power came from her proximity to the Hawthorne Foundation and the Civic Committee. When the news broke, not in the papers yet, but in the whispers of the boardrooms, that Nadine had been running a for-profit guardianship scheme. The donors panicked. They didn't care about me. They cared about exposure. The Hawthorne Foundation announced an immediate internal audit and restructuring of leadership. Nadine was removed from the honorary board overnight. Her picture was scrubbed from the website. Nadine Coleman, the Queen of the Heights, had become radioactive. I stayed at Marisol's. On Friday morning, a courier arrived with a letter. It wasn't from a court. It was from a law firm in Seattle. It was a message from Camille. Eleanor, I was told what you did. I was told you stood up to her. I want you to know something. When I gave you up, I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a tax break. I asked for a promise that you would be loved. Nadine told the world you were a transaction. But to me, you were the moon and the stars. You were never a smart investment. You were a child who deserved to be safe. My lawyer says the seal is breaking. The judge is retired. But the court is reviewing the original order. If they vacate the termination of my rights, the records will be open. All of them. I am not asking to be your mother. You are a grown woman who has mothered herself beautifully. But I will be here, waiting, if you ever want to know the rest of the story. Love, Camille. I held the letter to my chest. You were never a smart investment. That afternoon, I met Dana at the courthouse. We stood in the rotunda, watching the lawyers rush back and forth. We got the notice. Dana said, "Which one?" "The big one." She handed me a document. Order to unseal. Case number 94-0021. In re. The guardianship of Eleanor Hart. The court finds sufficient evidence of procedural irregularity and potential fraud to warrant the immediate unsealing of all records associated with the placement of the minor child. And there was a second page. Notice of asset freeze. Defendant, Nadine Coleman. Pending investigation into allegations of conversion, fraud, and identity theft. All assets held by the defendant, including the Hart-Coleman Preservation Trust, are hereby frozen. I stared at the words. She can't move the money, I said. She can't move a dime. Dana confirmed. She can't sell the house. She can't access the accounts. She is trapped in that big, beautiful house with the lights turned off. I walked out of the courthouse and sat on the steps. Across the street, I saw a woman walking a child. The little girl was skipping, holding her mother's hand. I thought about the little girl in the Polaroid, the one waiting for it to be safe. It took 30 years. It took a war, but the ledger was finally balanced. I took out my phone. I dialed the number on the Seattle law firm's letterhead. "Hello?" A receptionist answered. "Hi," I said. "My name is Eleanor Hart. I would like to speak to Camille." I waited. The line clicked. "Eleanor?" The voice was warm, shaky, and sounded like a memory I had forgotten I kept. "Hi," I said. "It is safe now." I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my own name, spoken with love, for the first time in 33 years. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Eleanor's journey of uncovering the truth and reclaiming her identity resonated with you. It is a reminder that while we cannot choose where we come from, we can absolutely choose who we become. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this drama, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, secrets, and family revelations. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time.